The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Why do the disciples ask Jesus to increase their faith? Does this question mean that we can have more or less faith by asking? And why did they believe that their faith was inadequate? I mean, earlier in Luke's gospel, Jesus sent them out with power to go out and spread the word and preach the gospel. They preached and healed. They had the faith to heal the sick and cast out demons. And now they're saying, increase our faith. How many of us feel like these disciples? How many of us feel that our faith is inadequate for the tasks set before us, no matter what we have accomplished before, earlier in our lives? We look at the world and wonder how we can possibly make a difference with all the violence and hunger and angry words and chaos in our society right now. We're overwhelmed by the demands we feel are placed on us to be good Christians. We're just not sure we're up to the task. But faith, according to Jesus, is just doing our job. It's doing what needs to be done that's right in front of you. And Jesus is saying that the disciples already have that faith. Now, be prepared, because I know that some of you might want to doze off when I start talking about the original Greek, but it's really important here. And my friend Brian Stoffergan said something really interesting about this passage. It just intrigued me. He says that Luke relates this story differently than we hear this same story in Matthew, but there is no noticeable difference in the English. So we don't know that Matthew and Luke are telling this story differently when we read our English Bible. So according to Pastor Brian, Matthew and Luke use two different clauses or different forms. And I used to know what that meant, like, when I was in Bible college studying Greek, but not so much now. In Matthew, when Jesus says, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed," the form he uses implies that they don't have that faith. They really do need more faith. But in Luke, Jesus is saying, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, and you do. In Luke, Jesus affirms that the disciples have the faith to do what is expected of them, if they just use it. We don't need more faith, Luke says. We just need to make use of the faith that we already have. When we feel overwhelmed by the demands of discipleship, we need to realize that sometimes faith can be pretty ordinary. That's what Jesus means when he says that if the disciples had faith the size of a mustard seed, they could move a mulberry tree. It doesn't really take all that much faith just to be faithful. We need to remember that even the simplest things done in faith can have an impact. So think about your last week or so. Think about the small things you might not have noticed yourself doing at the time. Did you hold a door open for someone who was struggling? Did you smile at a mother who was struggling with a cranky child? An encouraging smile. Did you comfort someone who was sad? Now consider how that action may have affected them, what they may have felt. The person struggling with the door may have thought, office doors are so difficult with a walker. I'm so grateful that someone saw me and helped me. They actually saw me. Or that mother. People always seem angry when my child has a tantrum, but today someone actually smiled at me and encouraged me as I was struggling to calm him. Or every time someone comforts me, offers me comfort, it eases my sadness a little and I can face the rest of the day. You may not have realized any of those things happened in people's hearts and minds. But that's what your faith has done in the world when you take actions like that. And the more we use our faith, the stronger it gets. Jesus tells his disciples, he tells us that we have all the things, all that we need to be faithful, and that being faithful is about recognizing the God-given opportunities to just show up and do what needs to be done right there in front of you. That's it. That's all you need to do. All the ordinary stuff we do all the time, which taken together and blessed by God, is pretty extraordinary. And faith is also an adventure. Faith is heading out the door each day and looking for opportunities to be God's partner and co-worker in the world. Faith is imagining that the various challenges put in front of us, whether solving a problem at work or releasing anger towards someone who has wronged us. These are actually opportunities that invite us to grow as disciples and witnesses to God's presence and the goodness of the world. So every time I speak about faith in a sermon, I like to find a different way of understanding it. This time, the way I'm going to share comes from a child. And a few of you, if you've been around quite a while, might have heard this story before. My colleague, Pastor Scott Gimmer, pastor over in Orangevale actually, told me about doing a children's message on this text. He called the children up to the front and told them about the mustard seed and the mulberry tree, and then he did a demonstration. He had a plate and a couple of jars with some spoons, and he had a jar of mustard. And he took out a tiny jab of mustard and put it on the plate. And then he got a bigger spoon and take up a big scoop of mulberry jam and put it on the plate. Then he told the children that if they had faith the size of that tiny dab of mustard, they could move the big glob of jam. The children looked at the plate, trying to engage their faith and move the glob of jam. And Pastor Scott was just about to share the point of his prepared children's message when one of the children cried out, "Pastor, it moved!" The congregation, of course, burst into laughter. And Pastor Scott says that he cannot, to this day, remember what his intended message for the children was. But he realized that this child had huge faith. He came to church, so he must have faith. The other children present were also at church, so they must have faith. And he absolutely knew that his pastor had faith. Jesus said if you have even a tiny bit of faith, you can move a mulberry tree or a glob of jam. And he had faith, his faith, and faith all around him. And hearing those words and knowing the faith that was present in him and others, of course it moved. It had to move because he had faith. As adults, most of us have lost this trust in our faith. We feel that we're too old or too small or just too tired to accomplish anything, much less moving a tree or even a glob of jam without tilting the plate. We need to regain our childlike faith. We need to trust the faith we have. We need to use the faith we have. We need to know that our faith is sufficient, and with God's help, we can still do great things. Trust your faith. Amen.